Right, hello everybody. My name's Alex. I'm a director and co-founder of Lambda Films. I founded it straight out of university with my erstwhile business partner Ryan, who's currently on his honeymoon, so he's not here. And I was actually, I'm here to talk about the other side of filmmaking in the city, and I think something that Norwich should be tremendously proud of, and that is the commercial video sector is producing videos. We've sort of glanced upon it and talked about it in brief, but the act of producing videos of a commercial and corporate kind of nature. I was actually thinking on the walk over, actually, so this is kind of off script, but we were actually quite lucky that Norwich found us. Both of us were sort of new to the area, came to the city, met at university, and it's only now that I realise actually Norwich was a really tremendous place to set up a business like ours, because it has a real pedigree in filmmaking and creativity, and I think the people here are very supportive, and I think it's down to groups like Hot Sauce as well, that we're able to be where we are, and the sort of slightly frightening size that we find ourselves now on the payroll bill I have every month. So we've come on quite a journey ourselves as a company, and I think Norwich is very much part of our DNA, and we're very, very proudly based here, and we work all over the world as well, as people like Dale. We've actually heard from a lot of accomplished filmmakers tonight, and I actually wanted to tie back some of the things they've talked about and actually apply it to our world, because I think they are becoming sort of closer entwined. I mean, I know absolutely nothing about film festivals and documentaries and all that sort of stuff, but I do think the principles still stand, because in the time that I've been working in the industry, it has completely and utterly transformed from when Ryan and I were in our bedrooms. The way we all consume content has changed immensely. Where we consume it, how we consume it, and the tolerance for content that's not relevant or interesting to people now is absolutely razor thin. So it is more imperative than ever that people are getting good quality content that is relevant to them, and I think all of us here can probably take something from that, but none more so than us as filmmakers. We get a real opportunity to actually tell stories and to make an impact on people. So what do I mean by commercials or corporate videos? Well, I'll tell you what I don't mean. I don't mean this, which is what I think we still kind of occasionally come up against, but I'm happy to report that by and large the maturity of the kind of clients we're engaging with is much, much better than it was when we started, and people actually are really trying to take a slightly more holistic, three-dimensional view when they're commissioning a company like us to carry out work for them. I mean, our work is actually very rarely carried out in offices these days, and it's taken us, across the UK, across the US, up a volcano in Colombia, up a volcano in the Caribbean for that matter, across laboratories in Europe, and we have further trips planned in India and North Africa, and all of these are, legit paid corporate work, either from UK-based clients or actually from international clients, and you literally never know who's going to be on the other end of the phone when it rings. All I wanted to talk about tonight was just one way in which I think the industry's changed most to take it away from this, and that is actually something we've seen a lot of tonight, and I think that's just the simple act of applying principles of storytelling to commercial content. So, as a species, the human race has kind of always passed information down by way of storytelling. I mean, Homo sapiens have existed for about 200,000 years, and we've only had language for the last 20,000 or so. So the act of storytelling is actually deeply ingrained in the brain and the human psyche and how we understand things. And evidence of storytelling throughout the years is actually all around us. I mean, we see it in cave paintings, the act of telling a story around a fire. Even only 500 years ago, the printing press was invented, and of course latterly you now have the web and an absolute explosion of information now available to everybody, but that in itself presents its own challenges. And even the act of selling, a sort of fairly modern phenomenon in itself, is still embedded in storytelling and very much within our biology. I mean, just for a very, very brief and simplistic biology lesson, the human brain is split into three core components, three brains, I am grossly oversimplifying things here, but it's split into the reptilian brain, which controls instincts like survival, sex, eating, that sort of stuff. The mammalian brain, which governs emotions on a basic level, and the neocortex, the newest part of the brain, reserved for higher functions like speech. So I'm actually speaking to you right now from my neocortex, but you're listening to me from your mammalian brain. Because you're listening less to what I'm saying, but more deciding whether I know my shit. Whether you want to listen, whether you think you can trust me, whether you think it's worth it, what are you going to take from it? And we all make decisions like this when we decide to buy a product or service, so this should really be applicable to any kind of marketeers in the room. You know, you've got to speak to the emotional part of your audience, and people buy on emotion and they justify with logic. And I think that the evidence proves that the shift overwhelmingly is toward taking some of the storytelling elements and techniques we've seen tonight and some of the science I've just described and actually bringing that into the world of what we do today. Anyone here a fan of this website? Yeah, I would hope so, given the room I'm in. Does anyone know what unless you saw me open the slide earlier, does anyone know what the most popular TED presentation is? No? It's one from this chap. It's the first one I ever watched. Simon Sinek. If you haven't seen it, do. I really, really urge you to check it out if you've got any interest in this sort of thing. Simon Sinek basically posits that the organisations that excel in the world are those that understand why they do what they do. And they communicate that with their customers, and their customers respond to that. So their customers are buying into a belief system, and he cites Apple as an example, and you can just look at the kind of crap that Apple get away with. I mean, look at, we've got Apple stuff all here. The kind of stuff that Apple get away with, but I think people accept it because they believe in what the company represents. And it's now become our job as kind of a slightly more mature company now to take a look at the kind of clients we engage with, what their why is. They may not have crystallized it themselves, the thought of it in those terms, but it's up to us to understand that. And believe me, some of them are pretty tricky to actually find out what exactly makes them tick. And I think just tonight, listening to everything, we've actually seen that Norwich is a home of people who are really quite adept at telling stories about, getting stories out by filmmaking. I mean, there's even some that aren't with us tonight. I mean, there's companies like Lambda Films who do world-class wildlife documentary content. It's a tremendous shame that Tom from Ford isn't here, because he's a lovely chap and he produces really top-drawer work, considering he was going to talk about producing stuff on a low budget as well, and the recent ad I think he was going to show us was really impressive for the budget he did it at. You've got companies like Curveball Media who do animations for all kinds of household names, and then you've got new and up-and-coming outfits like Copper Crayon, who are backed and supported now quite actively by the university, certainly a lot more than when I graduated. And that's, for us as a company, it's important to us also to foster the new kind of talent coming through, but we do get literally hundreds of people a month throwing themselves at us asking for any kind of work experience, most of it happy to do unpaid, which we don't really agree with. We'll always try and pay somebody something. It's an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. So that brings me on to Norwich being the city of stories. I don't know if anybody has seen this particular identity. So if you've been sat in here early, if you've gotten here early, you've already seen all the films. But it's actually one of the campaigns run by the Bid and Visit Norwich. And I've always quite liked it, actually, as an identity. I think it's actually something we can get behind, because I think over the decades, Norwich and Norfolk has tried to badge itself, but I think not done so terribly successfully, in my opinion, and it has always played it a little bit safe, whereas I've always thought this was quite smart and something we could get behind. So we were really happy to have the opportunity to work with them when they approached us. And I think I speak for the whole team when I say that they really love being able to do what they love in a city they love. And we all want to see Norwich at its brilliant best, and I'm sure everyone here does too. So it's nice to have an opportunity to do something a bit more local for a change, and it's nice to do something that can help show your city in a different light. So we're producing a suite of 6 films. They feature 6 people, and we're releasing them over 6 months. That itself is a slightly more modern approach. I mean, in the past we might have been approached to do a 5-minute sort of all and sundry type generalistic video that chucks a bit of everything in there, and maybe in 3 years' time we'll see them again and they'll refresh it. But the smart money is now on doing something like this that's going to mean something to perhaps a smaller number of people, but making concerted effort and spreading your resources and having a much bigger social footprint. So the first film I'm going to show you, and apologies to those that have already seen it when it was rolling earlier, is The Writer. Just given the audience we're in, it's the very first one we've done. We have since completed The Rambler, The Curator, and my personal favourite, The Restaurateur, which was released just a couple of days ago, and that was just tweeted this afternoon by Visit Britain, and that was only released a day or so earlier. So I think by actually pushing the boundary, pushing the envelope, and really striving for really high production values and showing Norwich in a different light, I think has perhaps got the attention of people who might not otherwise give it a second look. And I think that's because Visit Norwich were brave enough to give us full, complete, total creative freedom. And they've been true to their word, actually. They haven't ever queried anything we've done. And I think the work really has stood up as a result of that. So I'm going to roll the film, and then after that we have a panel discussion on Norwich as a creative place to base oneself. So that will neatly segue into it. So without further ado,
literature is so much a part of England's history, and it's so much a part of Norwich's history. It makes Norwich the city that it is. I'm really proud to live in a city of literature. People write because they get to create a world where things make sense to them. And I think I write because I want to create a world where things make sense to me. Stories and imagination is just as important as everything else, if not more important. And there's inspiration everywhere. Everything's a story. All of these things together make it pretty much a perfect place to try and be a writer. And I think I'm incredibly lucky to live here, and I can't really imagine living anywhere else.
over to Hugh, I assume.
Absolutely, yes. Just, I was in the middle of a tweet. But no,